Hello, welcome everybody to What is SmartScore? Identifying best-in-class smart buildings. And this is our fourth free webinar of the 2021 Smart Building series that we run here at Memoori. And today, of course, we're talking about SmartScore, which is a new certification initiative from Wiredscore. And today I'm joined by Jules Barker from Wiredscore, and also on the line is Joe Brown from KingSett, who's going to give the owner perspective. So welcome, guys.
Thanks very much for having me.
You are very welcome. And I hope it's going to be an interesting conversation today. I'm sure it will be. So following sort of like the normal kind of route that we take, we're going to give a presentation today, which is, as you can see, Introduction to SmartScore. And then we'll enter sort of after 15-20 minutes, like a Q&A part of the webinar, where we're happy to take any questions. So that could be from the owner perspective, which Joe, I'm sure, will be happy to answer your questions there. And more on the technical side, Jules, I'm sure, will be happy to take it. So maybe, guys, do you just want to both give a quick minute of introduction of yourselves?
Joe, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Joe Brown. I'm the Director of Building Technology with KingSett Capital. We are a asset manager located in Canada, and we've got around 15 billion of assets under management. And I'm in charge of the Smart Building program. I've been with the company for just over 2 years now, and we're heavily involved in SmartScore with Wirescore, and it's been a great journey.
And I'm Jules Barker. I'm Wiredscore Global Director of Product. I've been at Wiredscore for about 6 months, and prior to that, I was at British Land, who are one of the major investor, developer, owner of real estate in the UK, where I created and led their smart buildings team. And delighted to be at Wiredscore now.
Great. Okay. So just before we start the presentation, just a quick bit of housekeeping. As I said, questions, we're happy to take them after the presentation. If you guys, you want to put them in the Q&A box, you'll find that at the bottom of your screen on the right-hand side. If there's sort of any other admin points, then feel free to put those in the chat. That's pretty much it. So without further ado, Jules, will you take it away?
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone that's joining. Really excited to talk about SmartScore, which, as we've just heard, is new from Wiredscore. And that made me think that probably a helpful place to start would be to give the background for those that don't know Wiredscore about our history. So we've been around since 2013, as this slide shows. Started off initially in America, and then 2015 came over to the United Kingdom, and then between 2017, 2018, 2019, slowly spread across mainland Europe and into Australia. And really throughout that period, we were focusing on the Wiredscore certification to commercial offices. So Wiredscore, for those of you who don't know, focuses on the certification of connectivity in commercial offices. In 2019, not shown on this slide, we then expanded into our first new foray into different products. So 2019 was also the year where we introduced Wiredscore Home, where for the institutional home market, we now also certify blocks of rental housing. And that will be launching in North America in fact, I think it is tomorrow, very soon. And then since 2019, we've continued to expand across Europe. And then excitingly, this year in April, we launched our second major product, which is SmartScore. And that's what I'll talk about a little bit more now. So why SmartScore? This is a subject that's very close to my heart, actually. In my previous life at British Land know Wiredscore very well. And I'd known the team at Wiredscore for quite a long time. And I think in the very first meeting that I ever met them, I started pushing them to create SmartScore. It was my perception, and fortunately, it turns out the perception of others in similar roles to mine in other landlords and developers, that there was a real gap in the market, in that I was then head of smart places at British Land, and I knew that no one knew what smart meant. I didn't know what smart meant. I knew one thing, I knew what I thought it meant, but what I thought it meant was different from what any of my peers thought it meant. So there was a real challenge in the market that this word smart effectively was the least worst word that at the time I could come up with. And so it was clear that what the market really needed was someone to bring everyone together and come up with a common definition of what a smart building is and how you get there, very importantly. It was also really clear that there was a very, very big difference between some of the more experienced companies who developed, like British Land, had developed smart buildings teams, and for a number of development projects now had employed consultants like WSP or Arup to support them in putting technology into those buildings, and other companies that were, other developers that were at the very beginning of that journey. And then the third really thorny area about smart buildings is the ROI of it. How do you assess what the return is of investment in technology in buildings? And so these were really three areas that there was a lack of clarity around in the market, and the market was crying out, in our view, for someone to come and bring all this together and provide some common definition around it. So common definition for who? SmartScore isn't aimed at just one of the numerous, and really there's more circles that could be on this slide, but it will get harder to read. But SmartScore is not just aimed at one of the stakeholders of a building. It's aimed to bring value to all of them. There's obviously the investor. How does the investor know that ROI, that investment is being well spent? How does the investor know where their agents should be spending money in developing the building? There's the landlord. How does the landlord know what to do for the running of the building? What uses of technology will actually help them get better outcomes from the building? And then there's the tenant. How does a tenant know which is a good building and which is a bad building? How does a tenant know how to engage in this smart building that they've just started renting? But then there are obviously a lot of other circles that aren't shown on this. Smart buildings also matter to the users, hugely matter to the users. The people like you and me that go and sit at the desk in a building, or for that matter, the people that work behind the front desk and reception, or clean the windows or mend the lifts, and even the local community, the local population who suffer or profit from the environmental impact of that building. All of these are very important stakeholders, and a smart building should be in a position to help all of those different stakeholders. So how do we work out what to do though? The answer to that is the Wiredscore Smart Council. And I was asked, in fact, earlier today, whether when we were going through the development process of smart buildings, which industry body did we copy off effectively? And the answer is none of them, because none of the industry bodies had a single definition of smart buildings that we could use as our template. We had to start from scratch, and the way we did that was we gathered together some of the most influential and well-informed people in the industry, and over a number of different sessions, we tried to understand what in their view was missing, what in their view was needed, and then we sculpted SmartScore around what the industry needs. And so who did we bring together? A whole load of different people. So there were two groups, broadly speaking. The larger group, as you can see on the left, are the developers and the landlords, and ultimately for us, the customers of SmartScore. And as you can see across this, there are some of the biggest names in the business, including British Land. That was, I was the customer, I was the SmartScore council member before I moved across. And so Wiredscore went to all of these people and used the Smart Council to understand what would make a great certification, what was the gaps that we needed to fill. But we also, of course, needed the experts, the expert advisors, excuse me, the people who were going to those customers on the left-hand side and being their smart building consultants. So as you can see, there are names like WSP, there, Cushman's, CBRE, and Arup were there as well. And we came up with a single definition of what a smart building is. A smart building is one that delivers outcomes for all users through digital technology to exceed their evolving expectations. Like a lot of definitions, that's carrying quite a lot of baggage there. There's a lot going on in that sentence, but if there's one thing that I will draw out of that sentence, that definition, to stick with you, that I'll keep coming back to in the next 5 or 10 slides, it's the word outcomes. The critical point that Wiredscore believes around how to create a smart building, and this is what underpins our certification, is that it's outcome driven. I believe it's really, really important that you start with the outcome, not with the technology. A lot of challenges, I think, in the industry and in the way that the real estate industry has approached this has been that historically there have been a lot of great technologists who don't necessarily understand real estate coming and selling to a bunch of real estate people who don't necessarily understand technology. And that really is a recipe for disaster, because you end up deploying technology because it's sexy and because it's shiny and because you think that's what you need to do, because your investors are saying, don't get caught, but don't get left behind. Technology is coming for real estate. But you've got to resist the temptation to do that. You have to start with the outcomes. What do I want this building to do? And then you work out how, with those outcomes, how you use technology or not to meet those expectations and hopefully exceed them. So we launched SmartScore then, as I said, in April, a month or two ago. And we had 70 buildings at launch across 25 million square feet, 7 countries and 44 clients, which we were really delighted about. But I won't go on about that, and I will tell you a little bit more about what SmartScore actually is and does. So what is a smart building? A smart building for us needs to achieve 4 major outcomes. The first one is that it be cost efficient. That by deploying technology into that building, you reduce the cost of running it. You make it a more efficient building to operate. The second one is that it be sustainable. It's fairly clear that there's a lot that the real estate can do, and in fact must do. By some accounts, real estate's up to 40% of our climate emissions. And so there's real moral requirement, I think, for the real estate industry to improve the sustainability. And there's an awful lot that we as an industry can do in the development phase, for example, by better processes, better materials, more reuse of materials. And a lot of those kind of analog processes and choices, there's a great deal that we can do to remove, to reduce, I should say, our whole life carbon impact of our buildings. But we're only really ever going to optimize it if we use technology to automate the operation of buildings. And that's the only way that we can really reduce the in-use impact of on the environment. So sustainability is really a critical driving force behind smart buildings. The next thing is that it be inspiring, that it achieve great outcomes for the people that are there. I think it'll be no surprise to anyone. I'm sure many of you share this view that as we start to go back into our offices, the world will have changed to a certain extent, and it's going to be incumbent upon the landlord to work with the tenants to inspire people to come back to those offices. We've all spent the last year and a bit sitting at home, and we need to be enticed back into those buildings. And one of the ways we can and should do this is by deploying technology to make those buildings an amazing place to be. And then the fourth one is that it's future-proofed. One of the challenges about deploying technology in the building is that technology moves on. Technology moves on in a way that real estate hasn't historically had to do. It hasn't really been a problem. 50, 100 years ago, people didn't worry about, will this building that I'm building still be fit for purpose in 5 years' time? But with technology, that is a challenge. And so one of the outcomes that you need to deliver by deploying technology into a building is to make sure that it's fit for the future. So how do we actually measure all of this? There's 2 elements to our scorecard. One is the user functionality, and that's about 60% of it. And the other is the technical foundations. And that's obviously the other 40%. So what goes into that? The user functionality is a list of use cases, user journeys, as it were, that fit into one of these 6 sections on the left-hand side: sustainability, health and well-being, security, services, productivity, and optimization. And so this part of the scorecard essentially lays out a series of outcomes that the user or the stakeholder, I should probably say, really, of that building would want to see. And simply put, the scorecard scores how well the building is delivering against those. So, for example, it might be something like, I, as a user, want to be able to quickly and seamlessly find a free meeting room and book it. And then there are various levels to which you can fulfill that requirement from the user. The better you do it, the more points you get. Then the other slightly less than half in terms of points basis of the scorecard is the technical foundation, because clearly there are some fundamentals that any technologically enabled building needs to have in place. It needs to have, you won't be surprised to hear someone from Wiredscore saying connectivity is hugely important, but of course it's as important in a smart building, perhaps even more so than in a normal, in inverted commas, building. The building management system, the system, the software and hardware that underpin the management of all the different building systems. The integrated network, what the network is in the building and how it integrates correctly. The cybersecurity, we can pause and I can come back to that. I'm sure there'll be questions about that. But clearly, as we, as the industry, put our heads above the parapet and start talking about technologically enabled buildings, about connected buildings, then the hackers out there will realize that there's something to come after. And so it's absolutely critical that the more technologically adept your building is, the more time and effort you spend on cybersecurity. Data sharing then is also an incredibly important area, because particularly when it comes to, for example, optimization or sustainability, I think we probably all know that data is more powerful the more of it there is. And in order for real estate buildings to be able to optimize fully, we're going to have to share the data with each other as owners of buildings, in order to allow the algorithms to get to work and devise optimization routines. And then the last point is governance. It's really crucial that this is all done in a thought-through manner, that there is a sensible, thought-through governance framework that fits around everything that's going on in the building. And so one example of something that appears in that area, for example, is, do you, as a landlord or developer, have a document that lays out for your tenants what they need to do to plug into your building and to make the most of it? That's obviously critical if you're going to achieve the outcomes. So what is the value of SMART and the value of SmartScore, perhaps more particularly? There's 4 areas of benefit, we think. One is best-in-class design. It's about supporting the industry to get from what do I do, how do I make a smart building, to I know I've got a great building here. How do you get from A to B in that journey? And SmartScore is designed to help people through that journey. It's about making sure that their assets are future-proofed, so that you're not investing all this money only to find 2 years later you need to strip it out and replace it, or that technology has moved on, that you weren't aware of something that was around the corner. And it's our job to do that, that future-gazing activity for you and make sure that's built into the scorecard. The third point is about leasing and branding benefit. There should be an enormous benefit in SmartScore, in you as customers being able to demonstrate to the market that your building really is excellent, and that it demonstrates the value. It demonstrates asset value. It shows a good score should show that your building meets all of these criteria and is delivering value back to its investors. So I've gone on for a little over 15 minutes there. I'll pause and say thank you and ask if there are any questions.
Jules, that's great. Thank you. I see you've put up your email address there as well. So that's good. I'm sure if anyone wants to contact you later after the session, or indeed we are recording this. So maybe you could leave up the slides, particularly the
Yeah.
ones around, listing the different bits of technology. Just so people can see that. And as Jules said, everybody is listening. You know, if you've got questions now, this is the time, please put them in. If you type them in, I'll be able to put them to Jules or indeed Joe. I guess Joe will be able to answer things more from the perspective of the developer, the owner, and any sort of more technical questions Jules can answer. I mean, from my perspective, I think I picked out some things there where it's like music to my ears, right? Like outcome driven. Like it was great to hear that, and I think that's something that we've, like, in our research, talked a lot about. So I think, you know, like any kind of focus on that is really interesting and useful, right? So congrats on that. Then some of the other things, I think, of course, you mentioned return on investment. And I think, to be honest with you, that's like a conundrum that I think a lot of people over, you know, for years have been wrestling with, right? Why should I invest in technology? I want to know what the return on investment is, you know, ultimately, like, what is it and how do we go about it? I mean, do you guys have some thoughts around that? You know, how you measure it, how SmartScore is going to help deliver that?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and I've from my past at British Land as well. This is something I've wrestled around with, you know, over half a decade now. How do you define the return on investment? And actually, one of the ways that I began to frame this is to think of smart and think of technology in the built environment as digital placemaking. And so I think it's helpful. And this doesn't by any means wholly answer the question, but I think as an industry, we've got much more comfortable over the last, well, you know, 20 years or so, really, talking about placemaking, talking about, for example, British Land invested, you know, a few £1 million a few years ago in one of their assets, just planting trees. There was a bit more than just planting trees, but, you know, it was outside groundworks, prettifying the local environment. And 30, 40 years ago, that would have been something that people would have been really uncomfortable with, because, you know, we all know how the property industry works in terms of the returns figures for that investment actually destroys value, because you've invested money and there is no upside in terms of rent immediately. It's not like you've built another floor or you've increased the lettable area there by investing that money. There is the day one of that investment, the rents don't go up. So you've invested money to no return. But as an industry, I think we've got really comfortable that it's necessary to do placemaking type activities in order to drive longer term returns. And so British Land is really comfortable that investment they made in landscaping and tree planting has returned, because that particular asset's dramatically outperformed the market during that period. And I think a lot of what smart buildings is needs to be thought through that lens of it's digital placemaking. It's not physical placemaking, it's digital placemaking. And you are investing money in your asset, not necessarily so that day one that you will be able to draw a line with a ruler between the investment and the return, but so that you know you're creating an asset that over time will outperform because you're investing in it in terms of placemaking. Now, that said, the good news is that digital placemaking is better than normal placemaking, because there is an element of provable ROI between those two. You know, you should be able to prove, for example, that investments made in operating efficiency pay back, because you should be able to see that on a like-for-like basis, the building uses less energy or requires less maintenance, or there is less downtime in terms of your critical building systems. And similarly, the area where we hope that SmartScore will really be able to help is over time, we will be able to benchmark much more accurately, in the same way as we've been able to do with Wiredscore. We'll be able to benchmark that buildings that achieve great outcomes in terms of SmartScore outperform the market in terms of compared to like-for-like buildings that don't. Now, obviously, it's too early, a couple of months in, to provide the market with any exact data on that at this stage, but anecdotally, I think it looks promising, and I'm starting to see some the odd paper appear around the place showing that smart buildings do outperform like for like non-smart buildings.
I agree. That's when things would get really interesting, right? When we're able to benchmark buildings, and rather than just talk about these kind of, marketing terms, as you said earlier, right? Smart and not really understanding what that is, then there'll be a much clearer view, right, across the industry of what smart is, because you'll be able to benchmark your building. Joe, anything to add on that? What's your sort of perspective on how this helps measure?
Yeah, I think from a ROI perspective, it is difficult to prove out a lot of portions. There are smart things that you can make individual business cases for, and that helps to slowly push along a smart building program. At the same time, I think it's in the real estate industry, there are leaps of faith that you have to take at some point in time to have that marquee property and best building. Like in residential, can you say that you get more rent for having a balcony on your condo or your rental property? Maybe not, but the data does show that. I think anybody can look at it and say, given the choice between an apartment with a balcony versus without, I'll probably pick the one with. And I think these things make your building stand out, and they may not translate into higher rents, but I think in challenging marketplaces, they will translate into lower vacancy rates. And so that's how we're looking at it. And to attract those big international clients, we have some large downtown properties that primarily we're going after these certifications for, and we see them as a way to differentiate ourselves from the competition, and we're willing to put the investment in and the work in to ensure that we stay ahead of the curve, and that we do offer the best assets, and having this way to define it, I think, will help us build out these return on investment cases down the road as more and more people build in and we collect more data.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, interesting. We've got some questions coming in, which is great. I'm going to be a bit selfish, if that's okay, and ask one more before we get to these questions. I was really interested to see cybersecurity included on the list. I think that's important. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what would be, how are you measuring that? What would be your expectation from a building to reach a certain level of cybersecurity?
Yeah, very happy to. Not in excruciating detail, I'm afraid, but I'm very happy to talk about that. And this really underpins, and I think it probably connects to some of the questions that that are in the Q&A at the moment. The way that we think about it is we tend, throughout the certification, not to focus on a particular sort of technology, not on a particular sort of protocol, not on a particular sort of naming convention. And so similarly for cybersecurity, we're not specifying a particular type of cybersecurity provider or anything like that. The requirement is that you have a proper thought through cybersecurity policy in place. And the reason for that is that technology keeps moving. And between April and now, if we'd specified anything too specific in the cybersecurity section, it would be obsolete already. So what the requirement is that you have engaged in your cybersecurity, that you have a policy in place that has been approved by someone appropriate, as opposed to us saying you need to put a certain kind of firewall in place, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually that leads very nicely into the first question. How do you score a building technology when the technology is constantly changing and improving?
Yeah, and you're exactly right. The answers are very closely connected, aren't they? That this comes back to the outcomes, and what we are scoring is how well you are using the technology that's available to achieve excellent outcomes. We're not saying that you need to deploy a certain technology into the building. We're saying you need to achieve excellent outcomes for the users and the owners and the other stakeholders. And so the second half of that, where's the question gone? It's disappeared.
Let me get.
Sorry. Okay. And so correct. So what I was getting to is the question carries on: top score tomorrow should be better than top score today. Yeah, that's exactly right. The bar is going to keep rising, and that's exactly the same as it does with Wiredscore. This is nothing new, except that implicit in this question, that's right, that the bar probably rises faster with SmartScore, I would guess, than it does with Wiredscore, because connectivity is a comparatively mature market to Smart. And so in terms of the experience curve, Smart is at a steeper part of the experience curve than it is for connectivity. So the bar will continue rising. We will continue evolving this product. At the moment, we're expecting every 3 months or so, there will be iterations come out to it. And so you're absolutely right. The bar will continue to rise, but we're focusing this on outcomes, not specific technologies or companies.
Mm-hmm. There's 2 or 3 questions here that sort of are similar, I would say. They're sort of, I guess, how can I put this? Asking around sort of positioning, both compared to different methodologies which are trying to measure smart, one being smart building certification, but also how you link with other sort of, let's say, green building certificates like LEED or WELL, that's about wellness. How are these complementary? How do you see them fitting in with, let's say, the landscape that exists already?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, some are complementary and some aren't. And there's a question about the smart building certification, which is one of the competitor products. And, you know, clearly, I don't think we're complementary with that one. I think it is a competitor product. And we, you know, I won't go into detail about how I think exactly that we're different from them, but other than to go back to the user functionality and the outcomes point, that this is designed as a pragmatic tool for the industry, by the industry, and with the industry, created for the industry, in order to achieve great outcomes in terms of smart buildings, as opposed to an academic thesis on what the best possible smart building is. So that's where we come from in this. In terms of the other kind of more complementary certifications, we do absolutely and deliberately overlap with people like LEED and WELL and BREEAM and Reset, and we have been talking with them throughout the development of this scorecard to make sure that we have some kind of crosswalk in place, so that there is comparator points between the two. So for example, as I've talked about, sustainability is one of the fundamental drivers behind SmartScore. That doesn't mean to say that SmartScore is an alternative to LEED or WELL, for example. It's not. It doesn't go into anywhere near the same level of detail about sustainability as those scorecards do. But what it does do is it helps you use technology to achieve those outcomes. And particularly with people like LEED and WELL, they're very excited about this cross-pollination between the two, because the two scorecards reinforce each other, or at least they're intended to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sort of similar sort of question to Joe, I guess. I mean, is this, do you view this as, again, sort of complementary? So would you, with your buildings, are you going to look to get them certified by different, you know, certification bodies? So will your buildings be LEED and smart scored?
Yeah, like we typically go after certifications on again, our premium assets, and I see them to be very complementary. Even before the SmartScore certification existed, we were using technology to achieve LEED credits and WELL credits. Like it's there, it's inherently there. Now we are certifying the smart technology that we're using in a separate certification system to ensure that it's there in a more sustainable way, and that it's safe, and that it's built out for the future. So I think they're inherently all work together, and you can't achieve a LEED Platinum building without some level of technology, or a WELL certified building without using technology. It's just it's very complementary, and that now you can tell your people that are your prospective tenants that you not only have a smart and environmentally efficient building, but it's one that won't be hacked, and that you can it will stay current over time because you have all of those policies and procedures in place to make sure, and you just didn't go out and buy a bunch of off-the-shelf items and tape them together to get those credits. So yeah, 100%. We go after it. It's kind of an all or nothing approach in a lot of cases to get things done in these premium buildings.
Okay, yeah. Interesting question here. In looking at your council members, maybe you could go back to that slide, that would be useful. And research advisors, you indeed have some extremely good supporters. Question, how do you, or how come there's no building technology solution manufacturers on that list at the moment?
Yeah, well spotted. That's a great question. And it's something we debated long and hard in the background. And the simple answer is that it feels like I'm going to answer every question you asked today with exactly the same answer, but I promise that's not intended. It goes back to the point about outcomes. We were absolutely adamant that we want this scorecard to be technology agnostic, and the fear was that by getting some of the big technology names in, whether that's the kind of Microsoft, Googles and Amazons who are all moving into the smart building control area, or the more existing companies like Schneider or Honeywell or Johnson Controls, for example, that becomes much harder, because then you have people in the room as your advisors who are focused on not just the outcomes, the processes of what makes a smart building, but a particular technology underpinning it. You have people who are invested not in answering the question as a whole, but in answering it in a specific way. So we deliberately wanted to keep this agnostic. But that said, we have of course been talking to all of those sorts of different people. And the next phase of this, we absolutely want to have them very heavily involved.
Okay, good. Yes, another question here, which is something I wanted to ask as well. I guess within that triangle that you showed of investor, landlord, tenant, who is ordering SmartScore? Who is buying it, and at what stage in the building life cycle would you expect somebody to approach you and ask, to get their building certified? Yeah,
thanks. So I guess our customer is generally the landlord or developer. So it's the people that we're on. It's all the groups of people. Sorry, flicking backwards in 3 slides, bad discipline, isn't it? But it's all sort of the people on the left-hand side of here, generally. The people who are either the landlord or the developer, generally speaking. Clearly, there's a huge chunk of people who are both investor and landlord and developer. So, for example, our customers are quite often people like British Land or Hines, who own and are responsible for developing and the landlording, if that's a word, of their buildings. But we also have plenty of pension funds who are our customers as well. So they might not have their own in-house development teams, but they are the people who are interested in SmartScore. And I guess those people, they will all get a slight different type of benefit out of it, and it differs slightly. In terms of when, I would push you to get involved as soon as possible. The earlier you engage with SmartScore, the more value we will be able to give back to you. Because as I was saying at the beginning, this is absolutely not just a score sheet. The value of SmartScore, the value of what Wiredscore brings to our client relationships, we hope, goes far, far beyond just giving you a badge to show what your how good your building is. The earlier you engage, the more we can help you think through how to get to great outcomes with your building. And part of the point of this, as I said, it's about creating a common language, so that the landlords and the investors can speak to the supply chain in a language and using frameworks that both sides understand. So that I at British Land, to begin with, I found it very difficult talking to people like WSP and Arup and our smart buildings advisors, because the language can sometimes be quite impenetrable, and SmartScore aims to sit right in the middle there and help both sides effectively break down the Tower of Babel that otherwise is how it seems to me that we end up trying to build technologically adept buildings.
Yeah, I think that's some very interesting points there. A couple of again some sort of similar themed questions. One asking, could you run through a project that achieved a SmartScore award, and some specifics? I don't suppose it could be could be a real life project now, or something that's happened, or even just not imaginary, but how that would work, and is that possible?
Well, I wondered, Joe, is it worth? Do you want to take that one and talk through how you've engaged with SmartScore? Is that you're as real life as you come?
Yeah. I can, I don't know that I can get into the details of exactly what our scores and outcomes were, but we were I was on the Smart Building Council as well, and through the trial process, we went through a few of our buildings, and we engaged primarily on our existing, we on this for sure, on our existing assets and large commercial office buildings, and it was a process of going through and doing an inventory of our systems, determining where we're at, implementing processes in a lot of cases. If you've ever been through a LEED certification, it's a similar sort of thing where you go through and you're like, oh, I need to document these things that I'm doing. A lot of them were happening anyway, but making sure the formal policies and processes were in place so we could get the credits for them. And then you come out with a score. And with the existing building space, you're not necessarily going to be a platinum certified building on day one, but the value of this certification to me is that now I have a roadmap to get there. I have the scorecard. I've gone through the process. I know where my buildings are good and where they're lacking, and I can start to get them to where they need to be. And it takes a while in a lot of cases, because sometimes you need to replace these capital heavy items. You don't get the opportunity to replace elevator controls and your BAS and your security system all in 1 year. So it might take 5+ years to get to where you need to be, but at least the process is started, and you can map it out and make sure that when you do replace these systems, that they do fall into the smart building requirements that you need to get to where you're going, and you're not doing like for like replacements.
Mm-hmm. Is there, Jules, is there something perhaps people can go to on the website where they can see a case study or something?
Well, so I would point you, in terms of case studies, I'm not sure this wholly answers the question, but in terms of case studies, I point you to our website. And if you look for the Smart Building white paper on our website, that's got a whole collection of different case studies of how people how our clients have used technology in their buildings and smart buildings. It doesn't give a case study for someone at the moment going through the certification. So that's a good prompt and something that we should create, I think.
Mm-hmm. And are there different levels of accreditation?
Yes, they are indeed. And I took that slide out. That was in my pack. Let's see if I can move straight to it. Let's see if this works. There we go. It did work. So yes, there are different levels of certification. Look, it's very, very similar to Wiredscore. For those of you who know that, it goes up from is certified silver, gold, and platinum. So it's a very similar concept in terms of the levels. Yes. Okay.
And you mentioned Wiredscore there. Question from someone who's done multiple Wiredscore buildings: is there a checklist available for this SmartScore point system? It would be helpful to guide conversations with the clients.
We have various different bits and bobs. Depending on so the person that asked that, I would encourage you. So particularly if you know Wiredscore and you have contacts in our BD team, I would encourage you to get in touch with them, and they'll be able to furnish you with exactly what you need. We've got plenty of bits of kind of sales collateral, as it were, that will help with that. Absolutely. Or similarly, if you want, I'll put my email address back up. If you want to drop me a line after this, I'm very happy to put you in touch with the right person and get that sort of stuff to you.
Is I'm not massively up with Wiredscore, but does it work in the same way as LEED, where an individual can work towards becoming an accredited practitioner with this?
Yeah, that's known as an accredited professional program. Well, yes and no. So we do absolutely have an AP program for Wiredscore. It's currently in Europe, and because we in North America and the UK we deliver directly in-house. SmartScore currently is delivered directly by Wiredscore company ops teams and sales teams. But there will be, I would suggest probably by the end of the year, there will be an AP, an accredited professionals program in place for Wiredscore as well, because we recognise that it's a product, it's a certification that lends itself very well, if I'm honest, to that accredited professional program. Smart, even with SmartScore in place, Smart is still a challenging area, and I should say that we don't see SmartScore being an alternative to appointing a smart building consultant. SmartScore is the way you make sure you get the best out of a smart building consultant, at a fraction of the cost of what you're paying that smart building consultant, I should say. So it's not an alternative, and therefore it's helpful potentially to train up people who are potential smart building consultants to be accredited professionals in the way you describe LEED and WELL doing it. Yes.
Just quick, I see questions come in. This is just sort of to everyone. We are recording the session. So, if you want to share this with colleagues, you'll be able to do that. I'll be putting it up on YouTube either later tonight or probably tomorrow. And you should get an email tomorrow with a link to that. And if you don't, then you'll see it on our website at some point in the next day or so. So hopefully you'll be able to get it there. Yeah, then there's a question, and it's sort of again about the view on tenant fit out multi-tenant projects and the relationship with landlords. How is that viewed from a SmartScore perspective?
Yeah, that's another great question, and I'll answer it a bit, and then Joe, I would imagine you might have a view on this as well. I'll hand over to you. But this was again, we went through quite a lot of debate here around this subject, and it is tricky, because a building that is completed to shell and core and will in likelihood then be let to multiple different tenants is very, very different in terms of the way it's designed, the way it's thought through, and the outcomes you can achieve. Very different to a building that is designed bespoke for a single tenant. And so, for example, on one side you have a building, to pick a building that I know well is 100 Liverpool Street that British Land built, that was built without a tenant in mind, and then is now occupied by, I don't know, half a dozen, say, different tenants, compared to, for example, The Edge, who are a really excellent developer that are absolutely at the cutting edge of smart, and their business model tends to be far more about building bespoke buildings for specific companies. And so how do we create a product, a certification that is meaningful across that spectrum? And it is a spectrum, because there are obviously intermediary points. And the answer is, what we've tried to do is we've tried to create it such that the landlord gets points in the certification for provisioning wherever it is possible to provision. So, for example, the landlord has control over, I don't know, the network, the core building network. So that's to achieve all the points in that area, you need to deliver all of the things in that area. Whereas, for example, the landlord has no control over the meeting room booking system used by the tenant in his or her demised area. So what we say in that is, in order to achieve, you might have a requirement that is, as I think I mentioned, for example, I apparently using all the same examples today, but you know, I want to find and book a meeting room very quickly and easily, and the landlord can't necessarily control that, because if the tenant moves in and decides that their booking system is going to be you know, at the back of a locked filing cabinet on the back of an envelope, there's nothing that the landlord can do about that. But what the landlord can do is the landlord can provision a building app that has a booking system in it with an open API, and then in its governance documents, it can explain to the tenant exactly how to plug into that, so that the user of the building can, over one app, do everything from, you know, book his or her dry cleaning to booking a meeting room in their own demised area. So the expectation on the landlord there is to provision the service for the tenant to plug into, and that gets you all, or you know, that would get you full points on that particular line item. Does that make sense? I realise it's a slightly complicated area.
No, I think it does make sense. I mean, it is a complicated question. So no, I think that does make sense. I mean, Joe, is there anything you wanted to add from your perspective?
No, I think that's exactly the way we're approaching it, and not even from a point perspective. We want to provide our tenants with what they want. So I'm ensuring our systems are built out to control whatever we can control, but also give as much flexibility to the tenant as possible. And also through our own testing, making sure that we have options available, because it is an incredibly complex thing to build a smart space. And if my tenants want guidance on how to do their building booking, and I can point them towards the ones that are clean integration to our base building apps and things like that, or something that I've tested maybe in our corporate space, then it's a great feature to be able to add. But at the same time, if a large tenant comes in and they have their own systems, I don't want to handcuff them by any systems that are in my building. So having as open systems as possible, it helps to achieve both goals.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Thank you. One question here. It says, similar to LEED, could a SmartScore give you a list of items to consider incorporating into the building that could be considered by, for example, the building designer?
Well, yes and no, I suppose, is the answer to that question, slightly unhelpfully. In that, as I've said, we want to focus this primarily on outcomes. So we don't provide a list of technologies to put into a building. What we do provide is through the certification process a list of the customer journeys, the user journeys, and the outcomes that we think an excellent building could achieve with technology. So to go back to the same tired example that I keep going back to, we don't say, don't forget to have a meeting room booking system. What we do say is, do you have a way for the users of your building to quickly and seamlessly book a meeting room? And then we give examples of what okay, good, and excellent would look like within that. And I think that's really important, because within those okay, good, and excellent boxes, it does implicitly give examples of technology that you could and should be thinking of. But we don't want to start with the technology, we want to start with the outcomes. And I think that's really critical.
Yeah, no, I guess actually it would enable building owners, building designers to ask better questions, right? When they are looking for vendors. Assuming you're at that stage, right? For, you know, trying to qualify what they should be installing and what they shouldn't be. Joe,
yes, exactly.
Did you find that useful? Those kind of points?
Yeah, I would. The exact same thoughts were going through my head. It's there's a thousand different ways to get to the solution. So it's not, from my experience with Wirescore, it's not a follow this path. It's more, this is where you want to go, and then it's up to your consultant or in-house expertise or whoever you go to solve the problem. But hundreds of different ways to get there, given the rapidly evolving tech that's in the space. But it at least gives you the end goal, and getting in between that's the fun part, the problem solving portion of things.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Good time for a couple more questions. One here, Jules, I guess for you, which is about cost of certification, but as I understand, it's sort of not a one size fits all approach, right? So if someone has questions about cost, should they be directed to someone?
Yeah, absolutely. So the cost is, as you'll understand, different in different countries and things like that. So it's a little tricky for me to kind of say on a call like this exactly what the cost is, but I'd be super happy to pass you on to the right people for your geography. So if you already know Wiredscore, then contacting the existing business development salesperson that you already work with is great. Please do that. If not, drop me a line, and I'd be absolutely delighted to pass you on to the right person. Yeah.
And then I hear a question about, I guess, collaboration, right? Is there an opportunity to form part of the ongoing council strategy team, contribute and share thoughts about how to develop this?
Yeah, absolutely. A question from a fellow Julian. Thank you very much. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Look, the Smart Council has not retired as a result of Smart Building Launch. We absolutely want to keep it open as really as a forum for continued excellence in this area. We want to use it to make sure that we continue to understand what are the challenges around in-building technology and work out how collectively we can solve them. So if you are interested in being a part of that, then I'd be really, really happy to hear from you. Please just drop me an email.
Good. And your email address there is up on the screen,
Yeah.
at wiredscore.com. Any final thoughts from you guys?
No, no, thank you all. I very much enjoyed that. I hope that was useful for everyone, and thank you, Joe, for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. I thank you very much for the invite, and I thank everybody for listening to us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was good to get some questions in there. And I think this looks really exciting. And as I said, I'm glad to hear, some more detail about this, and actually sort of how the focus is on driving outcomes for tenants and everyone really involved in the process. So I'm encouraged, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops. So thanks, guys. Thanks, Jules. Thanks, Joe, for contributing today. And to everyone out there, if you don't have questions, then I'm sure Wiredscore will be able to answer them for you. So get in touch with them. And finally, just to say, we have recorded it. It's going to be up on YouTube later. So keep a lookout for that. You should get an email tomorrow with the link to the recording. So, and of course, stay tuned. We've got some more webinars coming for you later this year, and I hope we'll keep the content coming for you. So again, just to say thanks and bye for now. Bye, guys.
Thank you.